with you speaking about not just AI, but the strategic implications of AI. I'm Michael Jacobides from the London Business School, and let me just dive straight in. And I'll dive in because AI is weird. It's weird as a technology, not just because it's unusual in what it can do, but it's weird because it's probably the first technology that has developed without a use case. Usually, technologies start by money that exists because money will be found. People invest because they know how they were going to be using the technologies downstream. Here we have this strange case of a lot of money for a bunch of nerds that simply want to either be God, develop artificial general intelligence, or they want to do something that they themselves fancy. So one of the things that everyone is starting to do, now that the technology has advanced by leaps and bounds, is try to see, what does it mean for me? Most of the advisors are focusing on use cases, thinking about how they can use this technology in order to develop good stuff. In addition to that, we're only now starting to think about strategic implications, and there, I think, thinking is rudimentary. A report from one of the big three advisories, I hasten to add, not BCG, not Bain either, so you can figure out who it is, said that Gen AI will increase profitability by $4.4 trillion in the next 3 years. I looked at the report and I said, really? I study these things, I just can't figure out why. Well, what they had done is simply said, well, it's simple. We're going to see all the cost savings that exist. We're going to see that it will aggregate, and they're going to say it'll end up being profit. Well, if only the world was so simple. Gen AI is going to affect the world. It's going to affect the world in a very important way, but not just because it's going to give you cost savings and it will allow you to not have PAs, and it will allow you to simply understand what you can do in terms of the data and how to use it. Let me give you some preview of the research that we've done at the London Business School, working with Evolution Limited, my advisory, in a big project funded by the UK's Regional Innovation Fund, and collaborating with the Institute of Directors and General Atlantic and some other private equity firms. We asked a bunch of directors what they thought the implications of Gen AI would be, because we wanted to move beyond Gen AI as a technology and then say why it matters, how it matters, and how it will affect profitability. And we found a number of interesting things. First of all, what we found is that this tended to be organizations that focused primarily on cost saving, and organizations that focused on driving new product lines and thinking about business models. And surprise, surprise, the ones that did the latter tended to both be more advanced and be more excited and engaged in terms of the use of Gen AI. The second thing is that when we start looking at the strategic impact, there is a big heterogeneity in terms of the sectors. And that's something that we knew from the previous versions of AI, the non-Gen AI. AI had already affected the world in an uneven way. There were some few big winners and a number of losers. It increased how uneven profits were. It made some sectors stronger, it made some sectors weaker. Why is this important? Because tracking the impact across business cases and across different organizations will matter. And this is not only interesting because it does new stuff. It's interesting because it will affect who's going to be able to be profitable or not. Think about the excitement that firms had. I was having lunch with the CEO of an advertising company who was very excited, showing me a great campaign that was created with DALL-E. He said, all of these things that are boring and that are frictional costs, like the actors, well, we don't need them anymore because we can have people who are made by Gen AI, and it's wonderful because it reduces frictions. The problem is that to some level, he too is friction. And there are a number of people who now say, why on earth do I even need to pay money to an advertising company if I can create the basics of what we want directly from the technology? The substitution threat is true, and what we're seeing is that on the one hand, there is this challenge of substitution, but on the other hand, there is an excitement of taking advantage of the new opportunities. And we're seeing that the basis of competitive advantage is starting to change. What are the key variables there? There are things that we hadn't seen before, like how modular is your organization, or how important is regulation. Regulation turns out to be important. Think, for instance, about law. You would have thought that law should be entirely blown up. It's about patent recognition. Gen AI can do that. Why on earth do we need lawyers? Well, we need lawyers partly because society has got a legal implication for some people who need to take the responsibility for these views. And that protects them, and it does not protect others. So we're starting to see patterns that are emerging, and we're starting to see that Gen AI is going to change the nature of competitive advantage in profound ways. So there is a lot to uncover, and we have a short period of time, and we've got an absolutely world-class panel. So let me start with them and ask them their views. And I'm starting with François Candelon, who's a senior partner with BCG and the global MD of BCG's Henderson Institute, dear friend and co-author, an AI expert par excellence. And he has worked on the impact of Gen AI, both on the impact of AI, which we had seen earlier on, even in terms of how it differs between blocs, US, UK, EU. But more recently, François, you've looked at how Gen AI is not only good news, but could be good news or bad news depending on how you use it. Can you walk us through what you have learned and what the experiments that you did in BHI have taught us about the strategic impact of Gen AI and what it means for businesses?
Yeah, so thank you, thanks a lot, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I think that what we find is that at the moment people are looking too much at the technology only, while I believe that what we need to study is much more the human and AI collaboration. And this is why we decided to do a large-scale experiment with real workers, more than 700 BCGers, on real cases, real case assignments. And what we wanted to do is to try to understand, is there a frontier? Where does it create, human and AI creates value versus where it does not, where it destroys value? And for instance, we did two things first. One that was much more on creativity, brainstorming, marketing, and so on. And here we found that the human plus AI was much better than human. But on the other side, on problem solving, we realized that human and AI, it was not that it was not better than human, it was actually worse. And so it showed that there is a frontier, and therefore, and what is for sure is that this frontier will be shifting over time. GPT-4 was much better than GPT-3, GPT-5 likely better than GPT-4, Gemini, many new things coming. But it showed that every company needs to build an experiment capability. And we are basically working on another experiment at the moment to try to see to what extent can people with no data science background perform data science. We will, let's say, see the result in a month from now. So this was the first point. The second point, so you need to build experiment capabilities. The second thing that is important is that we found that there was, where it was creating value, a massive shift. The value of human plus AI was much better. 90%, 90, of people were benefiting from working with AI. And on top of that, we found that almost 2/3 of them were at the level almost not exactly the best humans, but almost the best humans. So it means that it has a massive impact on your talent pool. What are you looking at? Therefore, you need to change probably the way your HR policies. You need to revisit your recruiting process as well, because we were seeing really that the performance without AI was not predictive of the performance with AI. So you need to rethink your productive process. Last but not least, we found that while, as I said, on the creativity, the value, human plus AI was much better than human, we found that the ideas were much less diverse. So you had an increase in performance, but a decrease in diversity. So what does it mean? Maybe that you need to revisit your processes, and while we were thinking that we should first start with AI and then it would be refined by humans, maybe we should go the other way around. And so all your processes have to be revisited. So it will be a massive change. let's say, need to experiment, continuously experiment, need to revisit your HR policies, you need to revisit your processes, but it's worth embarking on it, as I said earlier today, because LLMs, large language models, is just a small wave. We're looking at many more things, and therefore the ability to unleash the power of these technologies combined with humans is probably the biggest challenge for our companies, and therefore it is a need and the moment to embark on this journey.
Terrific, and this also brings up the question of what are the skills that we need, and being involved in our AI task force in LBS, there's an existential question for educational institutions. What are the skills that you need to impart when you're at a business school in the presence of AI? The blurb, the buzzwords, AI can do that. On the other hand, AI can mislead you. So do we have new skills that are needed, even more than before? Are we ready to deliver them? Not entirely clear. That takes me to the question of certification. And it's a pleasure to have on the panel with us Byron Nicolaides, who is the CEO of PeopleCert, the earliest of the Greek unicorns, and one that is involved in certification and now increasingly in education. So I'd be curious to see in your field, because now Gen AI is going to start changing the requirements of what it is that we both certify people, but also change an organization like yours that needs to integrate this technology to add value. How do you think about it leading an organization that tries to be in the forefront?
Thank you. From the business perspective, we always try to be practical. So AI, generative AI, now it's a big thing. You speak to 10 people, to 10 organizations, you hear 8 opinions. Most of them are right. And the big challenge for us is what we do in practical terms every day. One, the elevator pitch of PeopleCert, of what we do, is an organization that we grow on the average 35% per year in the last 10 years. Our EBITDA margin is north of 60%, and the cash conversion is 90% on the EBITDA. So, looking into the future, we are approaching generative AI in 2 ways. One is what we do in the current business. In the current business, we know that Gen AI, probably the biggest impact is going to be on education and health, the way we see it. So, within ourselves, the impact that's going to have is sort of better automation, better quality, which is going to be essentially better profitability. But for us, we are very profitable anyway. We are going to be very profitable plus. Some calculations that we have done internally, we feel that if we employ generative AI across the organization, we're going to increase our EBITDA margin by 5 to 7 points. And this means creating documents, creating questions, automating processes, reducing the number of people, etc. It's important, but for a very profitable organization, it's less important. And one second aspect that we see with generative AI, if you start using it not very well, but in an average way, it closes the gap between the good employees, the very good employees, and the mediocre ones. Mm-hmm. Because the mediocre ones, or the not very good ones, they have a tool that they come very close to the good ones. This is what we do internally. However, as you mentioned earlier, and we agree, the big thing going forward is what type of transformation we can have in the next 5, 10 years, changing our business, changing our model, so that instead of growing by 30% per year, which is quite high as you understand, can we do it 100% every year for the next 10 years? Of course, we have a team, we have plans, we're strategizing. Some of you know as well, I cannot speak very much on this on public, but the real question that keeps me awake at night, as we say for the CEOs, is how can PeopleCert be the next Amazon on the education sector globally? And if we manage to do this stuff, I think generative AI, or how we use AI, is at the core of this.
Terrific. Now, I would like to move to a slightly different set of sectors, because one of the challenges that we have in sectors whereby both getting things exactly right is super important, and generative AI is good in generating possibilities in education, generating the possibility of engaging in a more interactive fashion. But when it comes to life and death decisions, we have seen that as humans, we take a very different view to things that technology supports, and we're much more resistant to them. So let me move to Harietta Eleftherochorinou, who is the VP of Innovation and AI Strategy at IQVIA, which is a $15 billion a company that works on the advisory on the advanced analytics and data that supports the life science business, and where I think that you even changed the title, the company changed the title a short while ago to include AI explicitly, which I guess is an indication that you guys are taking it more seriously. Can I ask you, in the field of healthcare, and a bit less so of those who are the specialist providers for healthcare, how is AI changing the game? Because the concerns that society has for reliability are different, and perhaps even more stringent than they are in education.
Thank you, Michael. AI in healthcare is at an inflection point. We observe the highest adoption that we have ever seen in over a decade in a sector that is highly regulated and traditionally resistant to disruption. We have been applying artificial intelligence, machine learning in over a decade, and we now see AI permeating the value chain, helping us solve complex problems that we have not been as effective to solve in the past. If we were to look at the drug discovery and development life cycle, discovering a drug requires complex chemical, molecular, genomic, patient, literature and other data to be combined along a series of experiments, a process that takes years. And we see recently that AI has been proven an effective tool to assist us in the discovery of drugs. In fact, there are 34 drugs currently that are being tested that have been discovered through AI assistance. We don't stop here. Once a drug has been discovered, it needs to go through clinical trials to be tested for safety and efficacy in humans. And this is a process where 80% of the times experiences delays, 85% of the times it's hard to find the right patients to recruit in the clinical trials. It is a rather complex and highly regulated, lengthy operation. Now, there is an excellent paper recently published in Nature, and with a lot of evidence from IQVIA showing that AI helps us recruit patients faster in clinical trials by at least 25%, and therefore helps us also with adaptive trial design to reduce delays. And again, we don't stop here. Once a drug has been approved to enter the market, then it all comes down to right diagnosis, right treatment, right time, and understanding which patients benefit from the right drug. And in the real world, we have all been there. There is a fair share of misdiagnosis that is taking place and prescription of treatments that just don't work. Work that we have done with the US, in fact, with the Juvenile Disease, Diabetes Research Foundation, shows that 40% of type 1 diabetics get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which means that 40% of the patients get treated for a disease that they don't actually have. Now, this is mind-boggling, right? So this is, in fact, the area that artificial intelligence in healthcare has proven the most effective. When combined with historical patient data, with the broader real-world data, has proven to be effective in improving the accuracy of diagnostics to over 90% in the majority of the cases in a plethora of diseases that we have tested. So we have talked about how AI, primarily machine learning, has been applied over the past 10 years and now is permeating the supply chain. Couple of years, the healthcare industry, much like other industries, have also been hit by the advent of generative AI, which is a new AI vertical that we are still evaluating. We're trying to identify and manage all the risks, but we do acknowledge that it bears great potential to transform healthcare. Now, Michael, François, Byron, you've all touched on the fact that generative AI holds potential, well, not always, to increase profitability, and it's often seen as a productivity play. I would argue that in healthcare, this is a limiting view. The World Health Organization, only a couple of days ago, has developed a generative AI assistant, which is called Sarah. This is a virtual lady that anybody in the world can access. In fact, anybody in the room can access, that she can advise us on risk factors behind certain conditions. Now that can be game-changing in how patients and healthy individuals access information to understand better the risk factors behind our conditions, to ultimately be able to drive the interventions that are needed in order to prevent those diseases from happening, bringing to life the vision of preventative healthcare. Now, we also see a high number of startups, as well as large organizations, launching Gen AI patient engagement platforms, as well as physician assistants that help physicians synthesize better the information that is required by the patient's record and help them make decisions about diagnosis, which is changing the whole patient-physician interaction. Now, with that in mind, and once we identify all the risks and we manage them, and we can talk about that later because it's important, generative AI is not just a productivity play. It can be a quality and an impact play. In healthcare, it can increase the quality of patient access to information. It can increase the quality of patient-physician interaction. And in healthcare in general, all organizations are ultimately serving the patient. So what I would say, very much in line with our title of our panel, is that AI applications that create value along those fundamentals that are helping get safer and more efficacious drugs in the market, that help amplify the patient voice, that help scale the patient impact and improve the patient experience, are ultimately those organizations in healthcare that will win in the AI battlefield.
Terrific. It reminds me of a discussion that we had in the World Economic Forum AI Governance Alliance, which is that AI, generative AI in particular, is starting to both raise the ceiling and lower the floor. And what you're speaking about is about the new opportunities that are being offered, especially in the area of healthcare, where you think about the value adding in things that we did not have as opportunities before. There is the rethinking, like with education that Byron said, and there is a lot of work that needs to happen, as François told us, in terms of the mechanics of figuring out how you make that happen without making mistakes. Marco, let me go to you because you've got a number of different hats that I think are going to be very relevant here. As a co-founder of Upstream, a company in creative digital and media, which, according to our current work, is one of the ones that is potentially the most challenged, not just because of the raising the ceiling, but the inclusion of new technologies, and also as a partner of a venture capital firm who needs to be on the lookout for the next big thing. Let me just ask you, what is it that you are seeing having the biggest potential transformative impact in terms of Gen AI?
So yeah, Gen AI, you know, a lot of people talk about the future issue of ethics in AI as if it is something that is in the future. In reality, the ethics of AI are being tested as we speak. There are certain sectors that are abusing the privilege of AI, and there are certain sectors that are blossoming and offering to humanity unbelievable things. Let me explain what I mean. You should think of AI as a co-pilot. Right, AI is a co-pilot of a company, a person, even a country. Now, there are co-pilots that can take you out drinking and gambling, and there are co-pilots that can take you down a very constructive path of enlightenment, right? And the same is true for companies, people, you know, organizations, countries even. I would say that a great example of AI that is currently infringing on what is good and what is ethical is the marketing industry, and a great example of a sector that is using AI in the most productive and ethical way would be healthcare, if you ask me. Let me explain. First of all, the real kind of breakthrough that came through large language models in early 2020, where everyone came to contact with the first iteration of AI that everybody recognizes, ChatGPT. Okay, it was actually the work done primarily by the companies that are most, in a way, unethical, you could say. So it was Meta, it was Google, and it was, to some extent, Amazon. When I say unethical, I don't mean as a total business, but the aim was, how can I target consumers better so I can get more advertising dollars? Okay, that was the principle. So obviously AI, and I understand AI essentially as being not automation. A lot of people, you know, kind of confuse the two things. Automating something is not AI. Teaching a machine to think or act like a human is closer to the principle of AI. And how do you do that? In simple terms, you offer training data to a machine, and much like a parent teaches a child, you teach the machine to do certain things. Now, the machine obviously is capable of processing orders of magnitude more than we can as humans, right? So that is a great strength of the machine. The minus of the machine is it doesn't have an ethical compass and often hallucinates. So in ChatGPT, they use the term hallucination when you ask a question, you get an answer that has full confidence, you think it's absolutely accurate, and it's complete bullshit. The machine essentially has processed information in the training data and then is regenerating that structure and that, let's say, form of expression, having used a data set that may be wrong and telling you, what are the percentage of people who die from cancer in the US in, let's say, a rare cancer like, I don't know, ureter. And it might give you the completely wrong answer, and then you go and use that with full confidence because the machine is so confident. So I would say that in the marketing space, what has happened with AI is an even greater ability to infringe on our private data and analyze our private data to target us better, right, and get more advertising dollars. On healthcare, I think one that Harietta can we've discussed this with Harietta, one major breakthrough where AI was really very present is DeepMind. It's run by a Cypriot English guy called Hassabis. This guy actually was bought by Google, interesting case, decided that it would be a damn shame if all of his science goes to sell more ads for Google, and then kind of made this arrangement with Google that he's going to run his own team out of London, and they are going to try and break one of the most difficult areas in healthcare, or let's say life sciences, which is essentially the way in which proteins fold, right? So maybe you've seen these pictures of how the protein folds. Now, before AI, each university would take what, maybe 5 years to break a single protein. How many proteins are there, Harietta, these days?
About,
not these days, generally. Imagine 30,000 proteins over 5 years each, right? Imagine by when top universities would have solved the protein fold mystery, right? This guy did it in what, 2 years? 3 years? Everything. He solved every protein mix, like every protein fold, and made this available to the world. Open data protocol.
I'm looking at the watch, though.
So I will finish by saying that AI essentially is, a force for good or evil, and it's up to us to decide how we're going to use it.
And we'll fold that into final thoughts. I'm going to ask very quickly sort of final questions from all participants. So to you, Harietta, since we were looking at healthcare, what do you think are the differences in using Gen AI in regulated versus not regulated sectors? Because we heard about the ethics, but any other differences that we need to be aware as we think about potentially using them?
Yeah, they are major. In healthcare in particular, the industry regulators.
Thank you. Sorry, and we'll try to keep it at around a minute each, looking at the watch.
In healthcare in particular, the industry regulators, FDA in the US, EMA in Europe, national and international bodies such as the EU, the recent EUA Act, develop regulatory frameworks in order to enable innovation while safeguarding public health. This means that all AI that is developed is mission critical, that is compliant with information security frameworks, the data privacy, and those regulatory frameworks. Give you 3 examples just to be in one time as you have asked. When we developed AI in healthcare, first and foremost, we need to have specialized, not generalized, data which is fit for purpose, rigorously cleaned, diverse, quality assured, regulatory compliant, that can be fed into the AI systems to produce AI outputs that could be trusted. And trust is the important word here. And in fact, it is 80% of our work that goes into the data preparation, only 20% goes in the actual AI itself. The second, Marcos talked about rather bluntly about it, and it's true. It's that generative AI bears plenty of known and unknown risks, right, that we are currently evaluating and we're trying to mitigate. Gen AI hallucinates. Without giving more examples, it does come back to you with answers that are totally made up, right? So in healthcare, we have asked, give us 5 studies for this particular drug. Came up with studies that just didn't exist. Now for the untrained end user, that can pose major risk. So again, in a regulated sector, what we do is that we spend tremendous amount of time on prompt engineering, almost a mastery, adding additional quality controls, governance, educating the people in the process in order to in fact, eliminate those hallucinations.
So moving beyond the regulated to the non-regulated, very quickly, François, your do's and don'ts in terms of people wanting to get their hands dirty with Gen AI.
So I think there are 2 things. One, they need to scout because it's moving at an extremely fast pace, and they need to build on the entire ecosystem. The second thing is that you need to think in terms of what the bottleneck will be. And the bottleneck won't be the technology. It will be, as you said, the lack of imagination. So what you need to do is to make your company an imagination machine company. And to refer to the book of our common friend Martin Reeves. So it's really about imagining. Consider that you don't have any constraint anymore, either through AI. In 5 years from now, you will have 100 times more compute power. So what do you do with this? Think about it.
And moving from the need to rethink your strategy to how you make it work in organization, do's and don'ts from your experience, Veron, from having tried to embed AI in your organization. What would be your advice for leaders who are now embarking in the journey? How they should do it and what to avoid?
I'm just going to repeat what
That's right. Yep, now it's working.
I'm just going to repeat what François has said. Don't limit your thinking at all. Use your imagination and think big.
Terrific. And final question, Marco. If you think about the specifics of Greece, you, because of big PI and your role at SEV, you're looking in Greece in particular. What do you think is the areas of either excitement or concern in terms of Gen AI in the Greek context, more narrowly?
I mean, Greece is not a generator of LLMs generally, or I would say the infrastructure behind AI. But you have, just like any other country, a lot of companies that are beginning to apply it in specific categories. And I'm optimistic in the sense that the people using these technologies are well qualified, given that Greece has, I think, is in the 5 top countries in the world in terms of graduates in engineering and mathematics. So yeah, I'm optimistic, but it's not like Greece is an exceptional case, right? It's just
terrific.
Like any other country.
And we're about to end just right on time. Only for you, just to conclude, Gen AI will change strategy and will change organization. It is an impetus for change. It is an opportunity for us to rethink how we can add value. And I think that with that note, I would like to ask you to thank the panel for their contribution. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.